My third son was born and the birth didn't go as planned, and it was a really traumatic time for me. It was, yeah, it was traumatic, and I still suffer a little bit from it. No, not a little bit, I still suffer greatly from it. And today I will talk about it a little bit. It started with me having contractions around 10 a.m. in the morning, like right after I brought my first son to kindergarten and I arrived home. I started to have contractions. They were coming like every 12 minutes, so really far apart, and they were not strong. They were like normal period cramps. So I didn't immediately go to the hospital. I just told my husband, get ready, he is coming today. Yeah, we talked a lot, we laughed a lot. Like we brought the suitcase into the car, cleaned the apartment a little bit. Then I told him I want to have a burger before I go, so he went out and got me burger and fries. My contractions got stronger and stronger, and it was 1 p.m. and they came like every 8 minutes. But I didn't want to go to the hospital yet. I wanted to wait for my first son to come home from kindergarten so I can say goodbye and explain to him what is happening now. So around 3 p.m. my son came home from kindergarten and we immediately got ready, went to the car and drove to the hospital. In the car, my contractions were really strong. I had to give my really best to keep breathing and not screaming and don't make my children think that I'm in pain. That was really hard, but I somehow did it. Arriving at the hospital, I went in first because my husband had to park the car, and I waited for him at the entrance, and then a midwife came down though. I think she was searching for me and she found me, and I explained to her I'm still waiting for my husband, and she said, he can come, we can already go we can already go to the labor room. And I said okay. They put me in a wheelchair, rolled me up, and as soon I was like, I wasn't even 10 minutes there. I was lying on the bed. They attached the things to my belly to hear the baby's heartbeat, and as soon as they started to hear the baby's heartbeat, I noticed that the atmosphere immediately changed in the room, and they were whispering first, and then more nurses and midwives came into the room and looked at the screen, and then they looked at me and they said if I felt sick. When I came here, I said no, I'm totally fine. Then they explained to me that the baby's heartbeat is really weak and is getting weaker and weaker. And then doctors were in suddenly, and at this point my contractions were so painful that it was really difficult for me to follow what they are telling me, because you also have to keep in mind that they are talking Japanese to me, my fourth language in life. So and medical Japanese is also a whole different thing than just normal conversation Japanese. So suddenly a lot of doctors were there and more midwives. I don't know, I think it was 10 people in that room, and everyone talked to me, but I didn't understand what they are saying. And then they asked me if I had fever at home. I said no, I didn't have fever, everything was fine. I got contractions, I came here, and because of the fear and the panic, I couldn't breathe through the pain anymore, and I started screaming with every contraction because it was so painful. And then a doctor sit down next to me, and then he explained to me that the baby is really poor and they have to get him out immediately or he's afraid the baby's gonna die. And that they need my okay to perform an emergency C-section. I just screamed, yes, please, it's okay, please get him out. They gave me a paper and I signed it without reading. And then they rolled me to the surgery room, to the OR. They rolled me to the OR. And I had contractions every minute. I had so painful contractions and screamed. And when you have pain, you are doing automatically this movement on the bed. But suddenly they hold my legs and my arms and made them straight on the surgery table. They started shaving me and preparing everything for the surgery. Then they told me they have to put me under anesthesia. They cannot do a local anesthesia because it would take too much time, and the baby doesn't have that time. They had to get him out immediately, so it wasn't the kind of C-section where I'm awake. I was fully sleeping. They put the gas on me and I fell asleep. And the next thing I remember is hearing my name, Jamile-san. And the second thing I remember is that after Jamile-san, they said, "Omedetou gozaimasu." So, Jamile, congratulations, your son was born. And I was so tired from the anesthesia. I heard everything and I wanted to talk. I really wanted to talk, but it didn't work. And I wanted to open my eyes, but I couldn't. Like, I was hearing everything and I wanted to respond, but I couldn't. It was like I was like stuck in my own body. Like, I cannot control my own body. It was a really weird feeling. But after a minute or so, they kept talking to me. I guess they wanted me to respond to check if I'm awake and I'm okay, but I couldn't. But after a few minutes, I finally could respond, and the first thing I said was Shion, which is the name he wanted to give my baby, Shion. So I said Shion, and I remember them saying, Shion, was that baby a girl? Because Shion it's like a boy and girl name, but it's more popular for girls, I guess. But we had a boy. And then I asked, where's Shion? I didn't say baby, I didn't say my son, I don't know, I was so stuck on that name, Shion. I said, where's Shion? And then they understood and they said that he's being treated by the doctors right now. And I was brought to my room. I had a catheter and I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand up. They told me what happened in the surgery, basically. They cut me open and the first thing they saw is that I'm extremely dirty inside. So my baby pooped inside me. He was in stress and that stress caused him to poop. So they took him out and he didn't breathe. He couldn't breathe because his airways were stuck with the fluid that got mixed with his poop, and it was stuck and he couldn't breathe, and they had to reanimate him and clear his airways, and he still didn't breathe on his own. They had to intubate him. They had to intubate him, and then he was brought then to the NICU. And of course I immediately said I want to see him, but they said I lost 2 liters blood and I still had the catheter, and my legs were in a massage machine. Like, my legs were constantly massaged so I don't get thrombosis, I guess. After an hour of being in the room, my husband came. I didn't even know he was on his way. I didn't feel like having my phone or doing anything. I was with my thoughts only with Shion, and suddenly my husband was in the room and I saw him and we both started crying at the same time. I think I saw him crying and then I cried because he was crying. He was really scared because he was on his way home because we had no one who could watch the kids. His mom was on the way here, but she lives in Kyoto and she was still in the Shinkansen. Like as soon as I had contractions, I messaged her saying he's coming, and then she took the next Shinkansen, and then she was here really fast so he could come to the hospital shortly after the surgery to visit me. And I asked him if he heard anything about Shion, and he said yeah, and he also saw him, so my husband could already see him, and he said he will go back to him soon. He just wanted to check on me. And then we talked and cried, and my husband went back to the NICU and he sent pictures to me of Shion, because at this point I also still didn't see him. And I saw the pictures and it broke my heart. He had so many tubes going in and out of him, and he was in this incubator. But I also instantly fell in love. He looked exactly like how I always imagined him to look like after seeing ultrasound pictures of him. I told my husband, talk a lot with him. Please let him know that he's not alone. I don't want him to feel lonely. Anyway, on the next day, the nurses said I have to practice walking, and if I can walk from my room until the toilet, that after that I can see my baby. So wow, I stand up so fast and I walked to the toilet. The toilet was outside of my room and it was so painful, but I didn't care. I just wanted to see my baby. And later that day they brought me to the NICU, and before entering the NICU I had to stop for a moment, and the nurse who was going with me, she asked what's wrong, and I told her that I'm so scared to see him because I don't know how I will react seeing him in that state. But she held my hand and she said she will go with me together, and it's fine, he is fine. And I saw him and I cried. My heart was so in pain seeing him like this. My husband also came, and then the doctor, the pediatrician, sat down with us and explained to us what happened. So my baby had a streptococcus infection inside my belly, which is weird to me because I got tested for streptococcus every week and it was always negative. But he had an infection, and that was also the reason why they always asked me if I felt sick or had fever. But I didn't feel anything because I also was infected. I also had to get antibiotics, because I also had this infection, but I didn't feel sick at all. I didn't have any symptoms. And that infection caused him stress in my belly, and that made him poop. And that poop, so babies drink the amniotic fluids inside your belly, and the poop mixed with that fluid, and he drank it, and then it was stuck in his airwaves. That's why he couldn't breathe alone when he was born, and he had that infection. So they said he has to stay at least 2 weeks in the hospital, which broke my heart. They told me that I can come home after a week, so I knew I have to leave the hospital without my baby. He stayed in the NICU for 16 days. I visited him every day and I brought him my milk every day. I pumped so much milk because I wanted him to only drink my milk, because in my head that was the only thing I could do to help him to get healthy. So every day I brought so much milk to him, and every day I had to go home without him, and it was so hard for me. I had strong depressions and I also felt so guilty. I felt like my body totally failed him in bringing him into this world safely and healthy. I started to ask myself if this was my fault. So I started to think, was it my fault? Did I do something? Didn't I listen to my body? I had an infection and I didn't notice that I'm sick. I didn't go to the doctor because even though I was sick, but I really didn't have any symptoms. But you start to ask you those questions. I also asked that question my doctor if it's my fault, and they immediately said no, not at all. Icky. Yeah. He was there because of his infection. He was born one day before his due date, so it's not that he was born too early. But yeah, they were amazing. So lovely, so nice. They made pictures with his hands and feet, and they wrote a diary which I could read every day, and they always took pictures of me and him together. It was really great. Like, they were amazing, really. The doctors were amazing and the nurses were amazing, right? And but every time I asked if they know when he can come home, they couldn't give me a clear answer, which was really, really difficult for me. And then one day I was just at the grocery store and my husband called me and he said that the hospital called and said that he can come home today. I started crying in the grocery store. I cried so hard out of luck that a man who was also there asked me if I'm okay. And on that day, so I finished grocery shopping. I drove home, and then we immediately drove to the hospital, and I was so excited for everything that I forgot to bring clothes for him to come home in. But we were lucky, like really close to the hospital was a baby store, so I rushed there and bought some clothes for him, and then we could finally take him home. And since then he is home and he is totally fine, totally healthy. He doesn't have any after effects of that. Yeah. Because I was also so worried that his brain maybe has damage because he didn't get oxygen after he was born because he had to get intubated. But no, everything is fine and the doctor said I don't need to worry. There is nothing I have to worry about. He's totally healthy. But it's really hard to cope with the trauma such a birth can give you. I still often dream about that day. I often see myself back in the labor room and then in the OR and having those pains, and everyone is talking to me and hearing the sentence that the baby's heart is getting weaker, heartbeat is getting weaker and weaker. The thought about going back to the hospital is scaring me. The thought about doctors, hospitals in general, is scaring me. And the question if I could have did something differently and protected him from what happened is still there. So that is basically what happened. I never imagined in my life that I would be an NICU mom one day. You always see that happening to others, and you don't think it can happen to you too, but it can. It was just like a big nightmare for me. Anyway, the important thing is that he is fine now and he's with us now, where he belongs. Thank you for watching. Yeah. To be honest, I don't think I would talk about it one more time. And I also didn't tell anything. There is just that part. There's like a big part I want to keep for myself. But if you have any questions about giving birth in general in Japan, I also had a normal birth here in Japan or about NICUs in Japan, then you of course can ask me and I would be happy to answer them. Okay, bye.